The road to the cabin was almost invisible under the early snowfall. Ethan's tires slid more than once as he made the climb through the twisting back road to the forest. He told himself it would be worth it. 2 nights away from everything. No emails, no phone calls, no deadlines, just him, a fire, and the silence of winter. When he reached the cabin, the sun was already fading behind the hills. The wood was old and dark, leaning slightly with age, the kind of place people drive past without even noticing. But to Ethan, it felt perfect, forgotten, hidden. He unloaded his bags quickly, carried them inside, and shut the heavy wooden door behind him. The first night passed uneventfully. He made a small meal on the wood stove, read a few chapters from the book he had been putting off for months, and listened to the wind. It was stronger out here than he expected. The trees bent with every gust, groaning like living things. When he finally drifted off to sleep, the sound of the storm became his lullaby. But by the second night, the storm grew heavier, much heavier. The windows rattled so violently he thought the glass might break. Snow slammed against the roof with hollow thuds, and the walls creaked as if they were struggling to hold the cabin together. Ethan sat by the fireplace again, trying to read, but he found himself rereading the same lines over and over. His eyes kept pulling away from the book, drawn instead to the sound of the storm. At first, it was nothing unusual, just the howl of the wind whistling through cracks in the wood. But soon, Ethan began to notice something different. It wasn't random. It wasn't natural. The wind rose and fell in strange patterns, almost like words. He leaned forward, holding his breath, listening. The fire popped loudly, and for a moment, he thought he was imagining things. But then he heard it clearly, something in the storm. A whisper, low and drawn out, as if someone were standing just outside the walls, speaking into the wind. Ethan tried to shake it off. His mind was restless, overstimulated. He poured himself a glass of water, stoked the fire, and sat back down. But the whispers didn't fade. If anything, they grew sharper, and then came the sound that froze him in place. Footsteps, heavy boots, crunching steadily through the snow right outside the cabin. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He told himself it was just a traveler, someone caught in the storm, maybe looking for shelter. But when he peered through the frosted window, all he saw was white, snow swirling in every direction, the trees bending, shadows shifting still. The footsteps continued, crunch, 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 slowly circling the cabin. He stepped back from the window, throat dry, every nerve screaming. Finally, he forced himself forward, grabbed the door handle, and yanked it open. The night air hit him like a wall of ice. Snowflakes whipped across his face, blinding him. He squinted into the storm, scanning the ground. There was nothing. No person, no shadow, no movement at all, and worse, no footprints. The snow was clean, smooth, untouched. Ethan stumbled back, slammed the door shut, and locked it. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he pressed his back against the door, listening. The footsteps had stopped. The whispers had stopped. Only the storm remained. For nearly an hour, he sat in the chair, clutching the iron poker from the fireplace, eyes locked on the door. He told himself over and over it was the wind, just the wind. Nothing more than the doorknob turned slow, deliberate. Ethan's breath caught. He gripped the poker tighter, waiting for the door to open, but it didn't. The knob turned back the other way, then again, back and forth, as though someone or something was testing it. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse than the sound. And then came the knocking. 3 heavy blows that rattled the wooden frame. Ethan didn't move, didn't breathe. Another 3 knocks, louder. He wanted to shout, tell whoever it was to leave him alone, but his voice caught in his throat. The cabin seemed to shrink around him. The air grew heavier. The knocking stopped. The wind howled. And then, nothing. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Ethan didn't know. At some point, his body, exhausted from fear, gave in. He drifted into a shallow, restless sleep, still clutching the iron poker in his hand. When he opened his eyes, the fire had died to faint embers. The storm had passed. Pale light seeped through the curtains. For the first time in hours, Ethan felt relief. He had made it through the night. That relief lasted only a moment, because the front door was wide open. Snow had drifted inside, covering the wooden floor in a thin, white sheet. His stomach twisted as he followed the trail. In the snow were footprints, not boots, not shoes, something else. They were too long, too narrow, and they didn't match any shape Ethan had ever seen before. The footprints led from the open door, across the room, straight to the chair where he had slept, and then they stopped right beside him, as if whatever had left them had been standing there, watching him sleep. Ethan bolted from the cabin that morning, never once looking back. He drove down the icy roads with trembling hands, swearing he would never set foot in that place again. But sometimes, especially on winter nights when the wind howls outside his window, he swears he can still hear it. Boots crunching slowly in the snow, circling his house, waiting for him to fall asleep again. Snow had been falling since the afternoon, thick and endless. The kind of snow that swallowed the world whole. Claire had stayed late at work, finishing up paperwork no one else wanted to touch. By the time she finally walked out, the city was already buried. Her coworkers were gone. The parking lot was silent, and her car sat alone under a heavy white coat. She brushed it clean with numb fingers, started the engine, and told herself she would be fine. Just a long, cold drive, and then home. Warm nights, bed, the comfort of her own walls. The highway was manageable, salted and plowed, but the mountain road toward her house was another story. A narrow path winding through endless trees, swallowed in shadow. Snow fell so heavily that her headlights created a tunnel of light, blinding her to everything else. No houses, no cars, no sound except the hum of her engine and the wind clawing at the glass. For a while, she tried to distract herself. She turned on the radio, searching for music, but every station was the same static. A long, hollow hiss, sometimes sharp, sometimes soft, almost like a voice trying to form words. She turned it off quickly. The silence felt safer. Minutes crawled by. The road curved and curved again. It all looked the same: trees, snow, darkness. Claire gripped the wheel tighter, her nerves building. She kept thinking about home, focusing on the thought of warmth, coffee in the morning, her dog waiting at the door. Anything to remind her this was temporary. And then, just ahead, her headlights caught it, a figure standing directly in the middle of the road. Claire's foot slammed down on the brake. The tires shrieked against the ice, the car sliding sideways before jerking to a stop just feet away. Her chest heaved. Her hands trembled. The figure didn't move. It was tall, wrapped in a long, torn coat that flapped in the wind. The head hung low, chin nearly to its chest, as though weighed down by something. Claire's mouth went dry. She wanted to honk, to scream, to do anything, but she couldn't move. She just stared, and then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. The road was empty. Her breath came out in sharp bursts. She leaned forward, squinting through the snow, searching, but there was nothing. No footprints, no shadow fading into the trees, just a smooth, untouched stretch of road. Her throat tightened. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, I saw you." Her pulse raced as she pressed on, slower now. Every curve felt like a trap, every patch of trees a hiding place. 5 minutes later, the car began to stutter. The lights flickered. The heater wheezed and went silent. No, not now. The engine coughed once, twice, and died. Darkness, silence. Cold, her breath came in clouds. misting the windshield. She pulled out her phone. No service, not a single bar. The storm wrapped around the car, pounding against the glass. And beneath that sound, something else, breathing, inside the car. Claire froze, her eyes fixed forward, too afraid to look back. The sound grew louder, heavier. Warm air brushed against the side of her neck, hot enough to melt the cold. Slowly, heart pounding, she lifted her gaze to the rearview mirror. At first, darkness, then movement. A pale face, hollow eyes. A grin stretched too wide. Claire screamed, throwing the door open, stumbling into the snow. The cold tore at her skin like claws, but she ran, boots slipping, lungs burning, heart hammering. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The road stretched on forever. Snow blurred her vision. Branches cracked in the wind. Every sound felt like footsteps chasing her, closing in. She didn't stop until her body nearly collapsed. When she finally turned her head, the car was far behind her, a black silhouette, half buried in white. The windows were dark, still, silent, but she knew it was still there. She walked the rest of the way home that night, miles through freezing wind, numb and shaking, but alive. The next morning, she called for a tow truck. Hours later, her phone rang. The driver's voice trembled. "Ma'am, are you sure you were alone last night?" Her stomach dropped. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because there are footprints, dozens of them, all around your car, not leading anywhere, just circling, over and over, like someone was waiting for you to come back." Claire couldn't answer. She just listened, her hands shaking, her breath shallow. From that night on, she avoided that road whenever she could. But sometimes, when the storms return and the snow comes down thick, she swears she sees it again. That same figure in the torn coat, standing dead center in the frozen road, head bowed, waiting. There's a silence that comes with deep winter nights, a silence that feels alive. Snow doesn't just fall in the forested swallow sound, covers tracks, erases movement. You can shout into the woods and it feels like your own voice gets lost halfway, strangled by the cold. That night, I was driving home along the old mountain road. The hour was late, nearly past midnight, and the snowfall was relentless. My tires crunched against the frozen path, the headlights barely pushing back the curtain of flurries. My hands gripped the wheel tightly, and though the heater hummed inside the car, I still felt the kind of chill that seeped into my bones. This wasn't the usual route. A rockslide had blocked the main road earlier in the day, and the detour twisted through the mountains where few people traveled anymore. There was nothing on either side but endless trees, heavy with ice, their branches bending like hunched shadows over the road for a long stretch. I saw nothing, just a steady blink of snowflakes, the dull gray blur of forest. And then, in the distance, I noticed something that shouldn't have been there. Through the shifting veil of falling snow, I saw a glow dot. At first, I thought it was a reflection aid trick of my headlights bouncing off ice. But as I drew closer, it became clearer. A cabin, small, old, half hidden among the trees. Its windows flickered faintly, as though lit by lanterns inside. The sight unsettled me immediately. This road had been closed off for years, I thought. No one lived out here anymore. Yet, there it was, warm light spilling onto the snow, cutting against the lonely dark. I slowed my car instinctively. The snow hissed beneath the tires, and for a moment, I considered pulling over. My curiosity was stronger than my reason. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, any sign of life felt strange, impossible, and dangerous. I parked on the shoulder, engine idling, staring at the cabin. That's when I noticed something stranger still. There were shadows moving in the glow of the windows. Not one, not two, but several. Shapes shifting back and forth, their outlines blurred by the glass and the storm. I could hear nothing, but I felt something in us. a tug deep in my chest that warned me I shouldn't be here, and yet I couldn't look away. I turned off the engine. Immediately, the silence fell heavy around me. The ticking of the cooling motor faded, replaced by the muffled whisper of the storm. I stepped out into the cold, snow crunching under my boots, my breath billowing in clouds. The cabin's lights seemed brighter now. The flicker was warm, almost inviting, but the longer I stared, the more unnatural it felt. The shadows inside didn't move like normal people. They swayed, slow and deliberate, almost rhythmic. My pulse quickened. I should have gotten back in the car. I should have driven away. But instead, I found myself moving closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. Every step felt heavier than the last. The snow rising nearly to my shins as I trudged forward. My eyes never left those glowing windows. And then, the lights flickered, just for a heartbeat, a hiccup of darkness. But in that instant, when the glow vanished, I swear I saw the outlines more clearly. Dozens of faces pressed to the glass, pale, hollow, watching me. The lights came back, and the windows were empty again. My breath caught in my throat, my legs locked. I felt the air thicken, heavy and biting cold. I couldn't shake the sense that I was no longer alone in the snow. From the woods around me, there came a sound, soft at first, so faint I thought it was the wind, but it grew clearer with each passing second. Whispers, low, curling whispers, threading through the trees, circling me like wolves. My skin prickled. My heart pounded so hard it echoed in my ears. I forced myself forward, just a few more steps, until I stood at the edge of the cabin's clearing. The snow reflected the glow, casting long, strange shadows across the ground. The front door was old wood, weathered and crooked, as though no one had touched it in decades. Yet the light inside was steady, glowing warmly, as though inviting me in. And then, the whispers stopped. The silence was crushing. From behind the cabin door came a sound that froze my blood. A creak, slow, deliberate. The sound of the door's old hinges straining. But the door didn't open. It just moved slightly, though something pressed against it from inside. Testing it, waiting, I stumbled back, my boots crunching loud in the snow. And for the first time that night, I felt a presence, something staring back at me from behind those glowing windows. The shadows inside shifted all at once. Every single one of them turned toward the glass, toward me, and the lights went out. The clearing plunged into blackness. I couldn't move. My body screamed to run, but I stood there, frozen, listening as the silence stretched too long, too heavy. Then, footsteps, not mine, not from the cabin, from the trees, soft, crunching footsteps circling me in the snow. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I just ran through the snow, stumbling, gasping, my chest burning, the dark pressing in tighter and tighter. My car was a faint shape ahead, barely visible through the storm. I threw myself into the driver's seat, fumbling with the keys, my frozen hands slipping. The engine roared to life, and I slammed my foot on the accelerator as my headlights cut across the clearing one last time. I saw it. The cabin stood in total darkness now, silent, lifeless. But the windows, every single one, were lined with pale faces, staring out at me. I drove until the road curved away and the forest swallowed the sight. And I never ever took that detour again. But sometimes, on winter nights, when the storm is heavy, I think about those lights, about those shadows swaying, about the faces pressed to the glass, and I wonder, if I hadn't run, would they have opened the door? Winter storms have a way of turning familiar roads into alien worlds. They blur landmarks, bury signs, and make every stretch of pavement look like the last. And on nights when the snow falls heavy, you feel like you're driving through a place that doesn't belong to you anymore. That night, I was heading home from a late shift. The storm had rolled in fast, swallowing the town behind me in a white curtain. The wipers on my windshield were useless, smearing snow more than clearing it. I leaned forward in the seat, squinting into the blur of headlights on endless white. The heater blasted, but the chill still crept into my bones. It wasn't just the cold outside, it was the silence. The storm was loud, yes, but there was a stillness underneath it, the kind that makes your chest tighten. I'd been driving for maybe 20 minutes when I saw her, a figure on the side of the road, standing alone in the snow. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing trick snow, forming shapes in the dark. But no, there she was, clear as day. A young woman, maybe in her 20s. No coat, no hat, just a thin dress clinging to her frame, her hair plastered to her pale face. I slowed instinctively, heart hammering. What was she doing out here, in the middle of nowhere, in this storm? Her hand rose slowly, fingers trembling, signaling for me to stop. I hesitated. Everything inside me screamed that this was wrong, but the sight of her barefoot, shivering, her skin ghostly white against the storm, was unbearable. Against my better judgment, I pulled to the side of the road. I rolled down the window a crack. "Are you okay?" I shouted over the wind. Her lips moved, but the storm swallowed her voice. All I caught was a broken whisper. "Please." Before I could think, I unlocked the door. She slipped inside quickly, folding herself small in the passenger seat. I glanced at her, trying to offer some comfort, but the words caught in my throat. Her skin was bluish, her dress soaked through, her hair dripping melted snow onto the seat. She didn't look at me, not once. She just sat there, head bowed, hands clasped tight in her lap. I swallowed hard. "Where are you headed?" Silence. The only sound was the storm hammering against the car. "Do you live nearby?" I tried again. This time, her head moved slightly. A nod. Barely I pressed on the gas, the tires spinning before catching traction. We drove forward into the white void. For a long while, neither of us spoke, but the longer she sat there, the more the air in the car changed. The heater was still running full blast, but I felt colder than before. My breath fogged heavier, my hands stiffened on the wheel. It was like she carried the storm with her. Every so often, I stole a glance. She hadn't shifted at all, still hunched, still staring down, her wet hair hiding most of her face. And then noticed her feet, bare, raw, red against the floor mat. Snow melt pooled beneath them, but there was no dirt, no salt, no grime, nothing from the road. Just water. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My heart thudded in my chest. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, fragile, almost childlike. "Turn here." I looked where she pointed, a side road, nearly invisible beneath the snow. I hadn't noticed it before. "Are you sure?" I asked. "That road looks closed." "Please," she whispered. Against my better judgment, I turned. The tires groaned over the snowpack. The headlights carving a narrow path into darkness. The trees loomed taller here, their branches sagging heavy with ice. It felt tighter, as though the road itself was narrowing, squeezing me into the woods. After a few minutes, she whispered again, "Stop." I eased the car to a halt. The storm outside raged on, but this stretch of forest seemed quieter. She finally lifted her head, slowly, and I saw her face. Her skin was bloodless, stretched thin. Her eyes, hollow, black, bottomless pits that swallowed the light. Her mouth curved into the faintest, longest smile. "Thank you," she whispered. Before I could react, the passenger door opened on its own. The storm screamed through the gap, snow whipping inside. She stepped out barefoot, walking into the blizzard without leaving a single footprint behind. I sat frozen, hands locked on the wheel, every instinct telling me not to follow, not to look, but my eyes disobeyed. Through the sheets of snow, I watched her walk into the woods, and as she disappeared, I saw them dot figures, dozens of them, standing among the trees, pale, still watching, their eyes glowing faintly in the storm. The door slammed shut. The car rocked, and I realized I was alone again. I hit the gas. The tire screamed against the ice before finally catching. I sped down that road until I found the highway again, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs. When I finally dared to look at the passenger seat, upholstery was soaked through. Water pooled deep into the cushion, dripping onto the floor. But the water wasn't clear. It was tinged with red. I never saw her again. But on winter nights, when the snow falls heavy, I sometimes glance at the passenger seat, and I swear, I can feel her sitting there still. Some winter nights feel endless, the kind of nights where the storm rages so fiercely, it feels like the world outside your walls doesn't exist anymore. Just white, wind, and cold. That night, I was alone in my grandfather's cabin, a small, creaking place tucked deep in the woods. He used it mostly during hunting season, but for me, it was just a quiet escape, or it was supposed to be. The storm began just after dusk. By nightfall, the wind howled against the siding, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers. Snow piled against the door so quickly that I worried I'd be snowed in by morning. Inside, the fire snapped and popped in the stone fireplace. I sat wrapped in a blanket, trying to drown out the storm with the soft hum of a radio. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps against the front door. I froze. The nearest neighbor was miles away. No one should have been out here, not in this storm, not at this hour. The knock came again, louder against every instinct. I rose and crept toward the door. My hand hovered over the latch, heart hammering. It was there. I called silence. The wind screamed. Snow whipped against the glass panes, but no voice answered me. Cautiously, I pulled the curtain aside from the small window beside the door. My breath fogged the glass, and through it, I saw a man. He stood inches from the door, his figure hazy in the storm. His clothes were wrong thin, tattered, more suited for autumn than a night like this. Snow clung to his shoulders, his hair matted with ice. His skin was pale, lips cracked blue. I almost opened the door, almost, but then I noticed something. He wasn't shivering. Not even a tremor. He just stood there, perfectly still. A fire popped behind me. My stomach sank. Do you need help? I called through the wood. Slowly, his head lifted. His eyes met mine through the glass, and I swear, they were wrong. It's too dark, too hollow. He didn't speak. He only smiled. I stumbled back from the door, my pulse racing. That smile didn't reach his eyes. It looked, stretched, forced. The knocking came again, this time not polite, not asking, demanding. Boom, boom, boom. The whole door shook against the frame. I backed into the living room, the blanket falling from my shoulders. My breath came fast and shallow. The fire's glow felt too weak against the shadows. Then silence again. I dared a glance at the window, empty. The man was gone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I turned in a slow circle, listening. The cabin groaned against the storm. I told myself he had walked away, that he'd gone back into the woods. But then, footsteps above me, on the roof, slow, heavy, deliberate. Each step sent a vibration through the ceiling beams. Snow falling from the rafters. I pressed my back to the wall, eyes darting upward, tracking the sound as it moved across the roof, toward the back of the cabin, and then silence again. I stood there, trembling, every muscle locked, my ears strained against the roar of the storm. Minutes passed, then came the sound of scratching. The back door. I crept down the hallway, each floorboard creaking like a scream. The scratching grew louder, sharper, nails against wood. I gripped a flashlight from the shelf and flicked it on. The beam cut a narrow tunnel through the dark. I reached the back door, my hand trembling as I aimed the light through the window. Nothing, just snow swirling, but the sound continued, scratching, scraping, right there, and then suddenly stopped. Silence pressed in heavy, suffocating. I let out a shaky breath. Then, bang, the back door shook violently, the glass rattling in its frame. I stumbled backward, the flashlight beam jerking wildly. Another bang, and another. The wood splintered at the edges, and then silence again. I didn't wait. I bolted back to the living room, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. My breath came ragged, fogging in the cold air. The fire had burned low, shadows stretching long and strange across the walls. And then Nye, sawing at the window, his face pressed against the glass, lips still curled in that awful, frozen smile. His eyes locked onto mine. But here's the part that chills me to this day. His breath wasn't fogging the glass. I dropped the flashlight. The beam spun across the floor, catching the walls, the ceiling, everything but that window. When I scrambled to pick it up again, he was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, every nerve on edge, waiting, listening. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps circling the cabin. Sometimes the faint scrape of nails against wood. But I never opened the door. By morning, the storm had broken. The woods were quiet, the snow glittering under a pale sun. I stepped outside cautiously, roots crunching in the fresh snow. My breath came slow and shallow as I rounded the cabin, and that's when I saw them dot footprints, dozens of them, circling the cabin again and again, leading up to every door, every window, even beneath the eaves, as though someone had crawled along the walls and roof. But the footprints weren't like mine. They were bare, and the snow inside each one hadn't melted, not even a little dot, as though whatever had been there wasn't alive. I packed up that same morning and left. I never returned to that cabin, but sometimes when winter storms rattle my windows at night, I hear it again. 3 knocks, slow, patient, and I wonder, if I ever open the door, will he still be smiling?